People say time is money, but I never thought you could actually sell it. I work in corporate strategy for a mid-tier firm in downtown Seattle. Nothing glamorous, mostly meetings that could have been emails, Excel sheets, and pretending to care about KPIs. My life wasn't bad, just predictable. That kind of dullness that slowly eats at your spine until your body shows up to work, but your mind stays in bed. Then I met Elias in the elevator. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I'd overslept and missed the Monday all-hands meeting. My boss, Joanna, wasn't happy. I was late, sweating, and cursing under my breath when the elevator doors opened, and there he was, mid-30s, sharp suit, brown leather briefcase. He looked like he didn't belong in a place like this. He smiled at me. Not a customer service smile. Something else. A knowing smile. Like he could see straight through me and didn't hate what he found. "You look like someone who hates Mondays," he said as I stepped in. I laughed awkwardly. "Don't we all?" "I don't," he replied. "I sold mine." I blinked. "What?" He didn't elaborate. Just stared ahead as the elevator rose. At floor 18, he stepped out. Before the doors closed, he glanced back and said, "If you ever get tired of carrying your Mondays, come find me. Suite 1804. I barely made it to my desk that morning, but his words stuck. I Googled selling Mondays during lunch. Found a bunch of motivational podcasts, weird Reddit threads, and one dead link with a black background that said, "Some people rent their souls. Others sell time." Suite 1804 wasn't listed on our internal directory. I asked the receptionist about it, and she just shrugged. That floor's been under renovation for months. Weird. I tried to forget about it. Work piled up. Joanna started breathing down my neck more often, and I went back to dragging myself through each week, counting the hours till Friday. Until Sunday night came around again. I stared at my ceiling, full of that heavy dread that settles in your chest like concrete. That's when I remembered Elias. And without really deciding to, I got up the next morning and rode the elevator to floor 18. To my surprise, the hallway was lit. Quiet, but alive. Suite 1804 had a gold-plated door with no handle, just a brass knocker in the shape of an hourglass. I knocked. The door swung open, and Elias was inside, exactly like before. Same smile. Same briefcase. Changed your mind. "I guess I'm just curious," I said, stepping inside. The office was strange. Sparse. Too clean. No windows. One leather chair, a small mahogany desk, and a glass orb sitting dead center, swirling faintly with something that looked like smoke and glitter. Behind him, there was a wall of clocks. Hundreds of them. All ticking, all set to different times. Some in normal numbers. Some in symbols I didn't recognize. "So," Elias said, folding his hands, "how much of your time are you willing to give up?" "I don't know. I'm not even sure what that means." He nodded like he'd heard it before. "You give me your Mondays. In return, you get what you're really after." And what am I really after? Freedom? Or purpose? Or just a longer weekend? It's different for everyone. Okay, but how does this work? Are you talking about hypnosis? Therapy? No. I take the day from you. It's mine. You'll skip over it completely. It'll be like it never existed. You'll wake up Tuesday morning with the work done, the meetings attended, the emails sent. Everything will happen without you. Except, well, you won't remember any of it. I frowned. And you'll do what with it? Use it. For my own purposes. Which are? He smiled again. Nothing you need to worry about. The silence stretched. I don't have to pay. Oh, you'll pay. Just not in the way you think. For some reason, I agreed. He slid a small glass slate across the table. My name was already engraved in it. All I had to do was press my thumb against it. The moment I did, the room dimmed. The clock stopped ticking. The orb on his desk spun wildly, filling the space with soft chiming sounds like wind through a cathedral. Then it all snapped back to normal. "Congratulations," Elias said, standing. "Your Mondays are mine now." I stumbled out of Suite 1804, feeling like I'd just woken from a dream. I checked my watch. 9:08 a.m. Tuesday. It had worked. And for the next few weeks, it was incredible. I never had to sit through another Monday again. I'd wake up Tuesday morning refreshed, inbox cleared, coffee still warm in the pot. My boss even started complimenting my Monday hustle, saying I was more productive than ever. It was like a magic trick no one else could see. I started using the extra time for everything I'd said I never had time for. Hiking, painting, reading books I bought years ago. I even started dating again. But then the dreams started. At first, they were vague. flashes of boardrooms, a sense of motion, a voice whispering things I couldn't remember when I woke up. Then they got more vivid. I saw myself, sitting at my desk, smiling too wide, talking in a voice that wasn't quite mine, making deals, but with people I didn't recognize, signing documents in languages I couldn't read. One night, I woke up with a voice in my ear, my own voice, but it said, "You think you're skipping Monday, but something else is living it." I tried to find Elias again. Suite 1804 was gone. Just an empty drywall panel and warning signs. I asked around. No one remembered seeing a man in a suit. Even the security logs didn't show me ever going to the 18th floor. But every Tuesday morning, my coffee's still warm. My inbox is still clear. And sometimes, I wake up with dirt under my fingernails. I thought I had it all figured out. Mondays, like a bad memory, fading into nothing. I had learned to embrace the ease that Elias had promised me. The weeks blurred together in a haze of productivity and quiet satisfaction. My life felt as though it had finally begun to flow effortlessly, as if I were riding a wave and all the barriers that once existed between me and my desires had simply vanished. But with every passing Tuesday, the dreams grew more detailed. They started to feel more real. Too real. At first, I ignored them, dismissing them as the price for living a life without Monday. After all, Elias had warned me. You'll pay, just not in the way you think. But what was the cost exactly? Was it just the dreams, or was there something more? It wasn't until the fourth week that I truly started to feel the weight of what I had given away. I woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat. My pulse hammered in my ears. Something felt wrong. The room was dark, but not the kind of darkness that comes with peaceful sleep, the kind that makes you feel like something's hiding in the corners, just out of reach. I checked my watch. Tuesday. Again. But something had shifted. The familiar feeling of detachment was gone. My coffee wasn't brewing automatically. My inbox wasn't empty. The usual serenity of my mornings, those comforting rituals, was absent. In its place was a gnawing emptiness. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the stress of the past few weeks had finally caught up to me. I grabbed my phone to check for any missed calls or messages, but the screen was cracked. It wasn't the phone I had been using. Confused, I went to the kitchen. The place felt foreign, like it didn't belong to me anymore. The layout, the appliances, everything seemed subtly out of place, as if someone had rearranged it while I wasn't looking. A picture frame on the counter caught my eye, but it wasn't a photo I recognized. The faces were blurry, their features distorted. I reached for it, but the image flickered and disappeared before my eyes. The world was twisting, warping around me. I looked at my reflection in the window, half expecting to see someone else. The same tired eyes stared back at me, but the person I saw felt unfamiliar. Was I changing? Or was it all in my head? I needed to find Elias. He was the only person who could explain this. I grabbed my jacket and rushed out of the apartment. The elevator ride to the 18th floor was excruciating. The doors opened, but the hallway was different now. The walls were cracked, peeling, and the once pristine floors were stained with something dark. The gold-plated door of Suite 1804 was gone. In its place was a rusted door that seemed to belong to another era, decades older than the building itself. I knocked. Nothing. Silence. But the feeling of being watched crawled up my spine, and I took a step back. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I turned to leave, but then I saw it. A shadow at the end of the hall, just before the corner. I couldn't make out the figure, but I knew it was there. Slowly, cautiously, I walked toward it, my breath catching in my throat with each step. Elias. I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer, but the shadow shifted. I was almost there when I felt a sharp, cold chill in the air. It was like the world itself had turned against me. The hallway seemed to stretch, bending at odd angles as I reached out, but the figure was gone. I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were made of lead. The walls were pressing in on me. The floors were twisting beneath my feet. A voice whispered through the air, faint but unmistakable. You've made a terrible mistake. I snapped my head around, heart pounding, but no one was there. I ran back to the elevator, my mind racing. As the doors closed, I saw it again, the dark shadow lurking at the edge of the hallway. It watched me as I descended, its eyes glowing faintly, like embers in the night. By the time I made it back to my apartment, the apartment that no longer felt like mine, it was already too late. The damage had been done. The dreams were no longer dreams. They were memories, memories of a life I didn't live. I saw myself sitting in meetings, but it wasn't me. It was someone else, someone colder, someone I didn't recognize. I saw my hands signing papers, shaking hands with strangers whose names I couldn't place. I saw my reflection in the glass, but it wasn't my face. It was a stranger's face. And the most terrifying part? I was there, watching it all, like an observer in my own life. I was trapped in my own mind, unable to wake up. The next morning, when I woke up in the same place, I knew that something had changed. The cracks in my reality were getting deeper, and I was losing myself, piece by piece. My coffee machine didn't work. My watch had stopped ticking. The clock on the wall, the one that had been there for years, had completely disappeared. I sat at my desk, staring at the empty inbox. There was nothing left for me to do. I was no longer in control of my own time. That's when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a man standing on the threshold. He was tall, wearing a gray suit and carrying a briefcase. Exactly like Elias, but different. His eyes were darker, and there was something in them that sent a chill down my spine. "You're still paying for Mondays," he said, his voice calm measured. "But it's time for the bill." I froze. "What do you mean?" He smiled, a cold, hollow smile. "You've given up more than you think." The man stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. He didn't need one. As he walked past me, I noticed that the apartment seemed to darken, like the air had thickened. His presence felt like a physical weight, pressing down on the room. "You've been living in a borrowed life," he continued, "and now it's time to pay for what you've taken." I felt the walls closing in again. The clocks were ticking in my ears. I could hear them growing louder, drowning out everything else. And then he placed the briefcase on the table and opened it. Inside was a stack of papers, contracts, agreements, terms and conditions, all written in a language I couldn't understand. But I knew what they were. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "You'll never have your Mondays back," he said softly. "But I can offer you something more." I stared at the papers in front of me. What could be worse than losing a day of my life every week? What else was there to sell? But I knew the answer already. It wasn't just my Mondays. I'd given him everything. The man's words echoed in my mind, rattling around like a loose coin in an empty jar. "You'll never have your Mondays back." They weren't just a warning, they were a prophecy. I hadn't thought about the cost for all that time. I was so focused on what I was gaining, extra days, endless productivity, that I failed to see how much I was losing. I glanced down at the briefcase in front of me, its cold metallic clasp gleaming under the dim light of my apartment. Inside, the papers stared up at me, each page more daunting than the last. I had no idea what they said, but I felt as if my entire existence was written in that foreign script. Every word was a nail, each letter a hammer, driving me further into an unseen grave. The man didn't rush me. He just stood there, watching me with those dark, calculating eyes. His presence was oppressive, like gravity had suddenly doubled in the room. I felt my lungs tighten. It was as though the air itself was becoming heavier with each passing second, pressing down on me, making it harder to think, harder to breathe. "What is this?" I whispered, my throat dry. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a seat in the chair opposite me, adjusting the cuffs of his suit as if he were in no hurry. The casualness of it all unsettled me further. I was in the presence of something not quite human. "The cost," he said finally, his voice low and even. "What you've taken, what you've stolen, cannot be returned in full. Mondays are only part of it. But you've given away something much more valuable. Your time, your reality, your very essence. You've chosen to live without the weight of responsibility, without the burden of the days. But the world doesn't work that way, does it? It has to balance itself out. Nothing is free." I didn't want to believe him. I didn't want to accept the truth that was sitting right in front of me. But deep down, I knew he was right. The more I tried to ignore the signs, the more I realized that the life I was living wasn't mine anymore. It was an illusion, an empty shell. And the worst part? I had been complicit in creating it. I stared at the papers again, feeling a wave of nausea wash over me. "What do I have to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The man's smile returned, but it wasn't comforting. It was as cold as the steel around me. "You've already done it. You've signed away everything that matters. Now, you're here to claim your reward. A life without Mondays is a life without consequence. But, like everything, there's always a price. And the time to pay it has come." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. I could feel it, that terrible truth creeping up on me. The life I thought I was leading wasn't real. It was a counterfeit existence, a bargain that had somehow slipped past my awareness. I had been living in a dream with no foundation, no purpose. The room felt colder, darker. The walls seemed to close in even more. I tried to breathe, but the air had become thick, like I was inhaling smoke instead of oxygen. I could feel the sweat on my skin turning cold. My hands trembled as I reached for the papers in the briefcase. "Read them," he urged. "Understand the deal you made. There are no more questions, no more bargains. Only the consequence of your choices." I picked up the top sheet, reading the faintly glowing text. The words blurred together in my vision. It was a contract of sorts, but not in any language I could comprehend. It wasn't just a contract, it was a life. My life. The cost of every Monday I'd given up was written in those pages. And the price was beyond anything I had imagined. The terms were horrifying. My days were no longer mine. I was trapped, caught between what I had sold and what I had yet to lose. My existence was a chain, each link forged by my own hand. There was no escaping it now. The deal had already been sealed, signed in invisible ink. I looked up at the man, fear creeping into my chest. "What happens now?" I asked, voice breaking. He smiled, his teeth sharp and white in the dim light. Now, you get to live the consequences of your choices. You'll spend your days trying to reclaim what you've lost, but it will never come back. The Mondays you've given away are gone forever, and you'll never find peace again." My heart pounded in my chest as the man stood up, his presence looming like a shadow over me. The room seemed to spin. The air was suffocating, the walls closing in, making it harder to focus. The quiet hum of the world outside felt distant now, like it was no longer real. But then, just as suddenly as it had all started, the pressure lifted. The man turned toward the door, his footsteps echoing through the silence. Before he left, he looked back at me with a final, piercing glance. "Remember," he said, "every Monday you stole, you took something else. And now, it's time to pay." And with that, he was gone. I sat there, alone in my apartment, feeling the weight of his words crushing me. The stillness of the room felt like a funeral. The life I thought I had built for myself was now a lie. Everything I had been working for, everything I thought I had gained, was meaningless. The days stretched on, one after the other. But the clarity that had once defined my existence was gone. Each day felt like a blur, a fog I couldn't escape. The Mondays I had stolen were lost to me, and in their place, a hollow emptiness took root. I found myself back at Elias's door, not knowing how or why, but there I was. I needed answers. I needed to understand. But when I knocked, the door swung open to reveal nothing, just an empty, decaying room, long abandoned. That was when I realized the real cost wasn't just losing Mondays. It was losing everything that made me who I was. My memories, my time, my essence, it was all slipping away. I could feel myself becoming a shadow of my former self, trapped in a world I no longer recognized, living in the aftermath of my own choices. And I would never be the same again.